Welcome back into the Daily Line, NBC Sports Radio, and on your television screen in NBC Sports Washington, Philly, Chicago, and Bay Area. We've been talking about this upcoming couple of segments for a while now. We've been chatting up Warren Sharp off the air, and now finally get to bring his knowledge to these airwaves. Many of you, if you are just football fans, gamblers, you know the name Warren Sharp at Sharp Football, sharpfootballanalysis.com. Warren, thanks so much for joining us. And there's so many things on our laundry list to hit on.
Oh, man.
I don't know really where to start. I'll start with this because I know we are airing in Philadelphia, and Offensive Rookie of the Year has been a topic we have discussed ad nauseum on this show because Kyler Murray, then we think there's value on other potential players. So you recently put out a player that you are very high on. So who do you like in that Offensive Rookie of the Year market?
Miles Sanders, the running back, the rookie from Philadelphia. He's got so much upside with the situation that he's in. And that's the one big thing that I always try to look at when we're betting on sports is what is the context that this player is finding himself in? And the context for Miles Sanders is possibly the best offense in the NFC, right up there with the Rams. And that's going to lead to a lot of red zone opportunities. If we look at what the Eagles had last year, they had a committee of guys, but they're a very analytically decision-driven team. So they want to put the guys in there that are going to produce the best. The reason they went by RBBC is because they didn't have anybody really good. So they kept filtering through guys. Oh, this guy's having a good couple of weeks, so let's ride him. Oh, he's not as good as anymore. Let's put somebody else in. Miles Sanders can steal those lion's share of carries. And once he exhibits that he is the more talented back, I think that he's going to be able to take that crown and he's going to be their lead back. A lot of red zone opportunities for touchdowns on a team that's probably going to make the postseason. And he could lead the team in rushing yards, rushing touchdowns. And that's exactly what you're looking for. And those odds for Rookie of the Year, the winner tends to be running backs. I mean, a lot of people look at quarterbacks and think, oh, it's going to be a quarterback. Those are guys who were good for Heisman candidate last year, but this year it's running backs that win that award.
I love the Miles Sanders bet. I also like David Montgomery at 9-1 for the Bears. What are your thoughts on David Montgomery? I followed him at Iowa State. He was so good there. Matt Nagy is a big fan, but you're not quite getting the value you would get with Miles Sanders. Yeah,
the thing with Miles Sanders, the reason why that was a good bet for me is because the odds were just wrong. And that's what we're looking at. We're looking at a candidate that could do it, but then also where's the market wrong? We're not just going to bet on a guy because we think he can get there, but the odds have to be strong enough in our favor. With Montgomery, I love the situation that he's in. We'll have to see what he's going to end up producing in terms of the workload with mixing in Cohen and whatnot. But I love the coach. I'm not as high on Mitchell Trubisky as a lot of other people are. I think he could struggle this season. I think the Bears are still going to be a good team, but if their defense falls off, they're not going to be playing with a lead as much, maybe less likely to run the football. So I don't think it's a bad candidate. I don't like the value quite as much as Sanders.
I want to talk about later, and we'll get into it, just how you think the odds are wrong and how you come to those conclusions. And I know we could talk for hours about that. So I'm going to keep it simple here and talk about Lamar Jackson. I know a guy that you're high on. What do you expect to see from Lamar Jackson, and why do you believe in him so much?
I just think that he's severely underestimated with what people saw last season. What people don't realize is that out of the 11 rookie quarterbacks in the NFL who started when they were 21 years old or less, Lamar Jackson has the best passer rating in NFL history, one of the best yards per pass attempt. And then if you just look at more recent time period and put him in the bucket of what did Mitchell Trubisky look like? Yeah. What did Carson Wentz look like? A lot of these other guys who were top draft picks, Josh Rosen, etc., Lamar Jackson's statistics from just a passing perspective actually superior to those guys. He was better than Joe Flacco was any of Joe Flacco's last 4 seasons. He was better than Joe Flacco his rookie season. So people look at Lamar Jackson and think oh, well, this guy threw some ducks. He didn't have a great passing season. He was so much better running the football. This isn't a good NFL quarterback. But again, go back to the context discussion. Lamar Jackson was not getting first-team reps in camp. He was on the sidelines holding clipboard, watching Joe Flacco weeks 1 to 9. All of a sudden, in the bye week, they want to insert him, but he's not running that same offense that he's been watching all offseason and during the first 9 weeks. He's now operating a totally different offense with really no good wide receivers out on the team. So he was he's not an super accurate quarterback. I'm not trying to make the argument that he's great. What I am trying to say is he's better than what a lot of people thought of him last year. And for that reason, there's value on the Ravens. There's value. I mean, the Ravens win total, it was at 8.5, but they were getting a lot of bets towards the under. Drop down at some spots, you can get 8. That's a really good wager, I think, going over 8 wins for the Baltimore Ravens. And I think Lamar Jackson is going to exceed people's expectations from a passing perspective, and we already know what he can do when he runs with the football.
I want to stick with the AFC North as we talk to Warren Sharp at Sharp Football on Twitter, sharpfootballanalysis.com. The Ravens in a jumbled division, well, I guess top 3. We'll leave the Cincinnati Bengals to the side. But everyone, and I'm sure if your Twitter feed is bombarded with the Cleveland Browns. They're the favorites to win the AFC North, at the darlings out in Vegas. You got the Pittsburgh Steelers at plus 170 as I'm looking at FanDuel right now. And then the Baltimore Ravens at plus 285. Are the Ravens a value play to win the AFC North?
I think they are, just from the simple perspective that Cleveland is that unknown commodity, but more than anything, what are we looking for when we're betting on these futures markets? We're looking for value. And right now, yeah, Cleveland could be a good team, but there's no value in betting on the Browns. Everybody's been piling on the Browns for months now. It started basically when they fired Hugh Jackson, right? When they fired Hugh Jackson, that's when the table started to turn. Then you bring in Odell Beckham Jr., and then everybody's on the Baker train, the Odell Beckham train, the Freddie Kitchens train. And don't get me wrong, like, that's a fun train to be on. I think they're going to be a good team this year, right? But I do think that there's no longer as much value betting them, and I think there's value in the other teams. And Baltimore is kind of like that ugly stepchild, that the team that's like kind of further behind. They got Lamar Jackson, a quarterback. He's not Baker Mayfield, so I just think that there's a little bit of value on them as a long shot. And I do think, I don't know if we're going to talk about it now or later, but there is value betting on teams that aren't projected to win the division to actually come up and win that division. There's historically a lot of value there.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. You like betting on underdogs to win their respective divisions. Who are some of the teams you like?
Yeah, well, the reason that I like that is because if you look at last season, only 3 teams that were favored to win their division by the Vegas odds makers before the season actually did. So 5 of the 8 teams that won their division were not projected to. And the year before that, only 2 teams out of 8 divisions actually were favored and won. And if you take out the Patriots, who are always favored and always win, the odds are even more in your favor. That we should be looking at teams that aren't necessarily the public darlings to win their division, but somebody who's like a little bit further behind. I think the Ravens, a good long shot. I also think the 3rd place team in the NFC South, which is the Carolina Panthers, right now they've only got a 7.5 projected win total. They also have pretty good odds. I think we got like plus 500 or so for them to win that division. And they're a team that, look, a year ago, I was betting on Andrew Luck when everybody was betting against Andrew Luck. Everybody was worried about his shoulder. He hadn't thrown the ball a lot. Now, granted, he's dealing with another injury this year. But a quarterback this past offseason who's similar, a little bit different, was Cam Newton, right? He had an injured shoulder, had to miss the end of last season. The team fell apart late last year. But I have belief in the team's philosophy. I didn't know how Carolina and Cam were going to react to the Turners coming in and coaching. I didn't know if Cam was going to take to that style of coaching that Norv and Scott Turner were going to implement. But that marriage really exceeded my expectations, the way that Cam was performing early in that season. And I think they've got a really good shot. Drew Brees kind of tailed off towards the end of last year. I think he took a strong hit on the shoulder in Thanksgiving against the Atlanta Falcons. And from that point on, his deep ball was not the same. They still should be the favorites to win their division. But in terms of odds that we're getting, I think Carolina is a good long shot.
Just about a minute on this question, and we go to the AFC East just because you talked about the New England Patriots, a team that me and Jenks actually like to talk about a lot, are the New York Jets and Sam Darnold. Is there value to bet on the New York Jets to win that division right now?
Well, you're going to get a little bit of value because everybody's always betting on the Patriots. The question is, how likely is that to happen? I'm worried about one of the injuries they just had at camp to linebacker. But overall, I love the offense that they're bringing to play up there. I like the fact that Adam Gase is bringing a little bit more up-tempo style than he's done in the past. And I'm big on Sam Darnold. I'm a huge believer in Sam Darnold. The jump that players make...
we love Sam Darnold.
I think he's going to make a massive jump this year.
So the jump that quarterbacks make from their rookie year to that number 2 year is more I think, substantial than most people realize. And I think Sam Darnold is going to take a massive step forward this year. So because of that, and because his stats are going to be better, that directly leads to wins. And I think the Jets have a really good opportunity. The only problem is I think the Bills are going to be better than some people expect this year too. But I still think the Jets very deserving. It's going to be hard to unseat the Patriots, but I still think the Jets might have a little bit of value.
A couple teams that you're either on or are fading or are riding with. You mentioned the Buffalo Bills. I'm seeing that about 6.5. Are you taking the over on the Buffalo Bills?
I'm not actually doing anything with the Bills. However, I will tell you that last year we went super hard. The hardest season win total we played last year was under 7 on the Bills. And I don't want to touch that this year because of the coach. Sean McDermott, I have so much confidence in his ability to coach football. He's one of the few defensive-oriented coaches that I really think does a great job at the larger level. And I think that they're going to get the best that Josh Allen, who I don't have a lot of confidence in, they're going to get the best out of him possible. So I really don't want to fade that team this year, although I don't really think they have a super high ceiling.
A team I have been on that I really like is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Their win total is set at 7.5. The over is at -120. So you're laying a little bit of juice. Do you like Jacksonville, or am I giving too much credit for Nick Foles being such an upgrade over Blake Bortles?
You're not giving too much credit for that. The one good thing I like about Jacksonville this year is that I'm sort of down on the Tennessee Titans and the Houston Texans, just from the perspective that I think both those teams may not reach the ceiling that is being set. And therefore, some of those wins have to get spread around the rest of the division. And with the question marks surrounding Andrew Luck and that team being taken off of some of the futures markets, I don't see a problem with trying to buy a little bit on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think Nick Foles and John DeFilippo, his offensive coordinator that he had in Philadelphia, I don't know they're going to have as much success as they experienced in Philadelphia, but I definitely see the bump in production from Bortles to Foles as being a reason why, with the me not liking the Houston Texans and the Tennessee Titans, why I would like the Jaguars.
A lot of talk has been surrounding the Chicago Bears and Mitch Trubisky and what he could do. This division does seem pretty wide open when you look at it from an outside in. You're an analyst. It's what you do. What do you see, and who's going to come out on top in that division?
I am very concerned with the Chicago Bears. I think they're being a little bit overrated off of the season that they had last year. Last year was a season where they went from, like 2 years ago, the hardest schedule, last year the easiest schedule. They get a new coach in there in Matt Nagy, and I think coaching gets overlooked around the league a lot. He made a big difference for that team. It was also that year 2 for the quarterbacks that we see where Mitchell Trubisky made a big jump. I think year 3 under Trubisky, I'm just not sure how much we're going to see him continue to rise. They lose a little bit defensively with Vic Fangio leaving and going to coach the Denver Broncos, and I'm just a little bit concerned. The problem that I have with like really wanting to fade them is I look around that division and I don't love any of the coaches in that division. I think Nagy is the guy that I love the most. So I love him as the best coach in the division, but I just don't know where their ceiling is. So I'm kind of steering clear of the Chicago Bears, but if anything, I'd be looking to fade.
Chatting once again with Warren Sharp, kind enough to join us in studio for a couple segments at Sharp Football on Twitter, his website, sharpfootballanalysis.com. A team that you've been tweeting about a lot, and I think perception has been changed a little bit, is now with the injuries that they've had to deal with. They've got the Melvin Gordon situation, Derwin James 3 to 4 months out, over-under set at 9.5. They were a 12-win football team last year, Warren, the LA Chargers. Where are you on the Chargers right now?
I really still like the Chargers. I don't think the Melvin Gordon situation hurts them really at all. I think the value of running backs gets overplayed a little bit. I think they're still going to be a good position there. I like Phillip Rivers, but the problem is they don't have quite as much depth at receiver. I do like them getting Hunter Henry back. He's one of my favorite players in the league who suffered injury and missed all of last season. I think they're still going to be a really good team, but Derwin James was just so valuable for them. If anything, I'd wait a little bit and let the market play out and buy them late, but I don't really want to fade them this year. I still think they're going to be a pretty good team.
And you put something up about the Chargers in close games, whereas they've been very good, at least recently.
Yeah, the Chargers have been one of the best teams in the NFL at winning close games last season. But prior to that, they were a team that was like always right around or slightly below 500. It's something about the way that they're coached, the way that they've played, but they've never really done well in these close games. So that's a big concern, is regression in those close one-score games.
Warren, I want to give our viewers a little bit of insight in who you are and kind of how you compete against other sharps. And I think it's very funny. Your last name is Sharp, by the way. So you said that the public and how they bet doesn't really affect the lines as much, but your main competition is trying to find the value and get in before other sharps do.
Yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm competing primarily against the other betting groups because once the odds maker sets the lines, I think myself and some of the other sharp betting groups, we know we will find the value in the places where those guys are wrong. But if the other group gets in before I do and screws up the marketplace for me, then my value is suddenly gone. And oftentimes we have similar models. So we're racing to see what's the most opportune time to get in and bet on a game. The worst thing for me is I'm sitting there continuing to analyze and I see a game that I had circled start to move before I can get there. So you have to be quick to the ball, and that's why we get in as early as Tuesday on some of these games that don't play till next Sunday when the market opens up a little bit and there's a little bit more, the limits are decent enough to still get a good wager down.
He's Warren Sharp. Phenomenal work. Thanks so much for joining us in studio.
Awesome.
At Sharp Football on Twitter. He is a must follow all throughout football season. This is the Daily Line.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.